The day I found out my son had secretly gotten married because I wasn't special enough was the day I decided to show them what a discarded mother could really do. "What time is your wedding, honey?" I asked my son, Ethan, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon while unpacking groceries I'd just bought for him and his fiancée. From the living room, Amanda's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass. "We already got married yesterday, Mrs. Christina. Only special people were invited." My name is Christina Miller, 67 years old, living in Austin, Texas. In that moment, I froze in my son's kitchen, still holding the grocery bags, feeling as if the whole world had just collapsed. My son had gotten married, and I hadn't even known. To understand the humiliation, you need to know who I was and what I meant in their lives. I was the mother who paid for everything, and I mean everything. The $1,200 monthly rent, utilities, internet, groceries, and even their little luxuries they felt entitled to enjoy. It all started 3 years ago when Ethan met Amanda at a company party where he worked as an accountant. Amanda was a sales associate at an upscale fashion boutique in downtown Austin. Always well-dressed, always talking about her powerful connections, and acting like she deserved a high-end life. Ethan, sweet and naive, fell for her instantly. He started spending beyond his means to impress her: fancy restaurants, designer gifts, weekend getaways. I watched him drown in debt, worried. But he always reassured me, "Mom, I've got it all under control." Ethan's father left when I was 7 months pregnant. He said he wasn't ready to be a dad and disappeared without a trace. From then on, it was just me and my boy. I worked any job I could, cleaning houses, selling things, taking care of the elderly just to raise him right. Ethan was my pride, a kind and brilliant young man, every single mother's dream. 2 years ago, when he said he wanted to move in with Amanda, I was thrilled. I thought my son was finally starting his own family. When he asked for some help with the initial expenses, I didn't hesitate. An only child, of course, I'd help. "Mom, we found the perfect apartment, but the rent's a bit high at first," he said. Amanda added sweetly, "Just for a few months, Mrs. Christina. Once we're stable, we'll be totally independent." That phrase, "just for a few months," became a song that played for 2 long years. Their apartment was in a luxury complex with a gym, pool, and BBQ area. The rent alone ate up more than half my pension, but I paid it anyway, telling myself it was temporary. But temporary never ended. First, it was rent. Then, the electric bill. It's just high because of the AC. Mrs. Christina. Then water, groceries, maintenance fees. Every time came with an excuse and a promise that it was the last time. Soon, I realized I was funding their entire lifestyle. Meanwhile, they dined at expensive restaurants, took weekend trips, and Amanda's nails and hair were always freshly done at salons. When I asked Ethan about their spending, he said it was an investment in his career, networking, client dinners, business image. Last year, Amanda even quit her job to focus on skincare certification classes, costing $2,000, calling it an investment in our future. A future, I now see, that never included me. Ethan even bought a new car using the savings I had freed up by covering all his bills as the down payment. They lived like the upper class on my retirement checks, and I truly believed I was helping my son build his future. The most painful part was realizing I was no longer welcome in the apartment I paid for. Every time I wanted to visit, Amanda had an excuse. "Today's not a good day, Mrs. Christina. We have company. The place is a mess. Maybe next week." And when I was finally allowed to visit, I felt like the maid. She'd say, in that dismissive tone, "Mrs. Christina, did you bring the dish soap I asked for? Oh, and remember to pay the condo fee tomorrow." As for Ethan, my son, he treated me like an obligation. No more calls, no more hugs, no more warmth. He only appeared when he needed money, and I endured it, thinking that was love, that it was just a mother's duty. How foolish I was. That day, I had asked one innocent question. So, what time is the wedding? Only special people were invited. Special people? Me, the one who paid all their living expenses, not special? Me, the woman who raised her son alone for 30 years, not special enough to attend my own child's wedding? Why didn't I know anything? I asked, my voice trembling. Amanda calmly replied, "Oh, it was just my parents, a few siblings, and some of Ethan's close co-workers. A small, private wedding." At that moment, Ethan walked in. Seeing the tension, he lowered his head, avoiding my eyes. He knew he had done something unforgivable. "Mom, it was just a small ceremony. We didn't want to bother anyone." I stood there, heart shattered, realizing that I wasn't anyone in my own son's life. Bother. Being present at my only son's wedding was considered a bother. Yet paying thousands of dollars every month for them wasn't bothering anyone at all. I left their apartment completely numb, unable to speak. When I got home, I collapsed onto the couch and burst into tears, the kind of tears I hadn't shed in years. I cried out of humiliation, out of betrayal, and out of the painful realization that I had been turned into an ATM by the very son I had sacrificed everything for. I stayed in bed for 3 days, replaying every detail of the past 2 years. Every bill I had paid, every time I cut back on my own needs to give them more, every time I hoped my sacrifices would be appreciated. And what did I get in return? The greatest humiliation of my 67 years on this earth. That Sunday, I made the most important decision of my life. On Monday morning, I went to the bank in downtown Austin and canceled every single automatic payment, their rent, electricity, water, internet, everything. I stopped it all. A week passed in complete silence. Not a single call, not a single text after the devastation they'd caused me. Until the next Monday morning, the phone rang. It was Amanda, her voice panicked. "Mrs. Christina, the rent is late. Did you forget to pay?" For the first time in 2 years, I replied with the calmness of someone who had finally reclaimed her self-respect. "Oh, didn't I mention I stopped paying?" The other end went silent. Then her voice shook. "Stopped paying? Are you joking?" I replied flatly. "No, Amanda, I'm not joking. You two have 30 days to take care of everything yourselves. I'm not giving another dime." I heard her screaming for Ethan. Seconds later, my son was on the line. "Mom, what's going on?" "Ethan, my son," I said, my voice strangely steady. "Special people should be able to handle things on their own. You two didn't need help from someone not special enough to be invited to her own son's wedding." Then I hung up. For the first time in 2 years, I ended the call first. And the first thing I felt? Relief. A massive, overwhelming sense of relief, as if a 100-pound weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Looking out the living room window, I knew that call was only the beginning of what was to come, because this abandoned mother still had lessons to teach about consequences, and they had no idea what was waiting ahead. After hanging up that day, I thought I'd get a few days of peace to clear my mind. But I was wrong. From that moment on, my life turned into chaos, flooded with calls, texts, and emotional threats I never imagined my own son could make. On Tuesday morning, exactly at 7 a.m., the phone rang again. It was Ethan, using that same sweet, pleading tone he used as a child whenever he wanted something. "Mom, we need to talk." "You can't just stop helping us like that," he said, sounding almost offended, as if I were some kind of lifelong allowance they were entitled to. I asked, "What have you two done to become independent in the past 2 years?" The other end of the line went silent again, because they knew the answer perfectly well. Lavish spending, vacations, luxury, while I was tightening my belt to fund their dream of living rich. Ethan even tried to blame me, saying Amanda couldn't sleep because of stress. I replied, though it was a lie, that I was sleeping just fine. In truth, I had been tossing and turning all night, wondering if I was doing the right thing. But when I heard my son trying to shift the blame onto me, I knew for sure I had made the right choice. The sentence that shocked me most was when he asked, "Mom, are you trying to destroy our marriage? Destroy it?" Me, the one who was humiliated and excluded from my own son's wedding, was the one destroying it? I said that the person who had destroyed everything wasn't me, and I couldn't recall anyone ever apologizing for what they had done. The other end fell into an uncomfortable silence because it was true, they had never said sorry. 5 minutes later, Amanda called. She said I needed to understand their situation, that they couldn't pay everything right away, and that I had promised to help forever, as if I had signed a lifelong sponsorship contract for them. When I asked bluntly, "Why can't I stop paying bills that aren't mine?" she had the nerve to say I was overreacting. Overreacting? Being excluded from your own child's wedding and calling that overreacting? That entire week was pure hell. Morning, noon, and night. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, flooded with long messages trying to guilt me. Ethan even sent me voice notes, crying and calling me cruel. They even tried to negotiate, suggesting they would pay half and I would pay the other half during the transition period, as if I were an investor in their marriage contract. By Thursday, Amanda had the audacity to show up at my house. When I opened the door and saw her fake, pitiful face, I almost slammed it shut, but I let her in, just to see how far her shamelessness would go. She started spinning a ridiculous story about how the wedding happened so quickly. Her parents pushed them into it, and they got a last-minute courthouse slot. All lies, poorly rehearsed ones at that. It sounded like she was reading from a script, but it was obvious these were just clumsy excuses. The most absurd reason she gave was, "We didn't invite you because we didn't want you to feel sad that the wedding was so simple. You once said you wanted a big one, right?" A blatant lie. I never said that. In fact, I've always criticized flashy, wasteful weddings. When she realized I didn't believe a single word, Amanda dropped the act completely. The tears vanished. And the real face, the one I'd always suspected hid behind that sweet facade, finally showed itself. She started talking about responsibility and the life they've built, as if I had an obligation to keep funding their illusion of wealth. Then she said something that froze my blood. "You're going to ruin our marriage over something so small." She called the humiliation I suffered something small. I replied, "If your marriage can collapse just because my generosity ended, it was never solid to begin with." At that point, Amanda showed her true colors. Her face turned red with anger. She stormed toward the door, then spun around and threatened me. "You'll regret this. If you keep being this stubborn, you'll end up with no family at all." Stubborn. In her eyes, holding on to my dignity was being stubborn. I simply said, "If family only exists when I pay for it, then I guess I never had a real family." She slammed the door and left, and I stood there, realizing I had finally seen the true nature of the woman my son had chosen over his own mother. That weekend, the pressure intensified. On Saturday morning, Ethan showed up at my house unannounced, his face full of panic enough to almost make me soften. He said they were about to be evicted because the landlord wouldn't wait any longer. I asked, "You both work, how do you not even have $200 to pay rent?" Ethan lowered his head and confessed something that left me stunned. They were $8,000 in credit card debt. $8,000. While I had been covering all their basic living expenses, they were still wasting money on useless things, burning through my savings to feel free, then spending all their own money on nonsense. When I confronted him, Ethan dodged, saying, "Mom, everyone gets into debt when they first get married." I answered, "People with common sense live within their means. No one digs themselves into debt just to look happy." At that moment, I realized things were worse than I had imagined. They weren't just irresponsible, they were shameless, and they expected me to keep funding that lifestyle forever. Ethan tried to play on my emotions. "Mom, you can't just abandon your own son," I said. "I'm not abandoning anyone." An apartment. They could always move in with Amanda's parents, those so-called special people. Ethan's face darkened. Clearly, moving in with his in-laws wasn't an option they wanted. Funny how those special parents weren't so eager to take in their special couple. Ethan left quietly, head down. I sat there, wondering how things had come to this. For a brief moment, I questioned myself. Am I being too harsh? Should a mother just forgive? But then I remembered the sentence that broke me. Only special people were invited, and all my doubts vanished. That week, I noticed something shocking. The neighbors started looking at me differently. Mrs. Carmen, who lived next door, stopped me at the gate and said, "You did the right thing, Christina. I always knew Ethan and Amanda were taking advantage of you, but I didn't dare say anything." Then others started talking too. I found out the whole neighborhood knew I was the one bankrolling their luxury lifestyle. While I walked everywhere to save money, they were driving their brand new car to weekend getaways. I suddenly realized how naive I'd been. Not only had I been exploited financially, but I had become the neighborhood joke, the gullible mom still supporting her grown son. 2 weeks later, on a Monday morning, I got the call I had been expecting. It was Margaret, Amanda's mother. She had been present at that special wedding I was excluded from, and she had always treated me coldly whenever we crossed paths. Her tone was commanding, the kind of person used to getting her way. She said she needed to clarify a few things and would be coming to my house that afternoon. The way she said it, as if I were obligated to receive her, as if she had the right to step into my life, infuriated me. But I agreed. I wanted to see, face to face, what kind of woman thought it was acceptable to exclude a groom's mother from her own son's wedding. That's when I realized the real battle was just beginning. At 3 p.m., Margaret pulled up in front of my house, driving a shiny silver BMW, a subtle reminder of why she thought she had the authority to lecture others. She got out with an air of arrogance, dressed as if heading to a corporate board meeting, not visiting her daughter's mother-in-law. During the 2 years Ethan and Amanda had been together, Margaret had always treated me like an outsider. At birthdays or family events, she'd talk to me with polite condescension, her disdain barely concealed. It was clear she saw Ethan as a good catch for her daughter, and me as the baggage that came with him. When I opened the door, she walked straight in without waiting to be invited, her eyes scanning my living room as if she were appraising its value. She sat on the sofa like it was her own home, setting her designer handbag on the floor with a deliberate flourish. Her opening line was exactly what I expected. "We should handle this like mature, civilized women." That Ethan was stressed from work, and that the tension in the family was all my fault. I sat quietly, just observing how she tried to twist my decision to stop being exploited into something cruel and irrational. According to Margaret, I was selfish and unreasonable, that families should help each other in hard times, and that I couldn't just abandon my son when he needed me most. When she finally finished her little monologue, I asked directly, "Did you know I wasn't even invited to your daughter's wedding?" Her expression shifted instantly. The superior tone vanished, replaced by cold calculation. She said, That was their decision. I don't interfere with Amanda's choices. But when I pressed further, do you think it's right to exclude the groom's own mother from the ceremony? Margaret's true nature came out. She replied, "Every family has its own way of doing things. Maybe it's time you accept your new role in Ethan's life." A new role, as if being dismissed and pushed aside, was some kind of promotion. Then she revealed the real reason for her visit. "I have a proposal to put an end to all this." She said she and her husband were willing to buy Ethan and Amanda a small house as long as I transferred all the money I'd spent over the past 2 years to them as an investment in the new property. I was speechless at the audacity. They wanted me to pay for my own exploitation so they could look like the saviors of their children. Margaret called it a way for you to contribute to the family's future without creating financial dependency. I immediately replied, "I'm no longer interested in funding people who treat me like trash." Margaret sighed, as if speaking to a stubborn child, then began to threaten me. She said Ethan and Amanda were thinking of moving to California, where her family had more opportunities, and that I might lose contact with my son forever if I didn't cooperate. It was emotional blackmail, plain and simple. Pay up, or lose your child. But what she didn't know was I had already lost my son long ago. Ethan, the man using cold, manipulative words to threaten me, was no longer the boy I had raised. I said firmly, "If he wants to go, that's his choice. I no longer make decisions out of fear of being abandoned because that abandonment already happened a long time ago." Margaret's face turned red with anger. She said, "You're making a big mistake. Family is sacred. You'll regret choosing pride over love." I replied, "It's not pride, it's dignity. And if their love depends on my money, then it was never love at all." The air grew tense. Margaret switched tactics again. She started talking about my age, saying, older people often make mistakes with money, and that she knew of many cases where seniors were taken advantage of. She was implying that I was confused, carefully laying the groundwork to question my mental competence. Later, Margaret said, "Maybe you should find a professional financial advisor. The government has legal measures to protect older adults who might be struggling." That's when I realized she hadn't come to negotiate. This was an assessment, a calculated test to see how mentally sharp I was. She wanted to determine whether I was of sound mind so she could use it against me later. I stood up and said, "This conversation is over." Margaret stood too, but didn't leave right away. She started walking around the room, glancing at photos and items as if she were taking inventory. Then she asked, "Do you have plans for this house yet? Have you updated your will? Does anyone help you manage your finances?" Those questions were wrapped in fake concern, but it was obvious they were invasive and strategic. I repeated that she needed to leave. Margaret looked at me with an icy stare, the same look Amanda had. She said, "You're making a very dangerous choice. Lonely and stubborn older women often end up in terrible situations." A clear and deliberate threat. If I didn't cooperate, they would find another way to get what they wanted. I escorted Margaret to the door. Before leaving, she turned and said one final thing. "Ethan and Amanda have legal rights over you, their family. There are many ways to protect seniors from impulsive decisions. You should think carefully." When the door closed, I stood silently in the living room, trying to process what had just happened. That wasn't a visit from a concerned mother-in-law, it was an interrogation, a prelude to whatever legal move they were planning next. I immediately called Nancy, my longtime friend, and told her everything. She was furious, saying Amanda's family had finally shown their true colors and warned me that people like them wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. I had to protect myself. That afternoon, I went to see a lawyer. I couldn't handle this alone anymore. I needed legal advice to understand my rights and how to defend myself from their next attack. Attorney Henry Caldwell, based in downtown Austin, was a respected expert in family law. After listening carefully to my story, he sat quietly for a moment, then said bluntly, "Margaret's visit was clearly an act of intimidation and manipulation. You need to take immediate action to protect yourself." The first three steps Attorney Henry Caldwell advised me to take were: 1. Change all my bank and investment account passwords. 2. Redraft my will, clearly stating my sound mind and independent intent. 3. Document every single interaction with Ethan, Amanda, and her family. He also suggested I install security cameras around my house and grant him limited power of attorney for legal matters only. So if anyone tried to pressure me into signing papers, they wouldn't be able to do a thing. Leaving his office, I finally felt like I had a clear protection plan, and more importantly, I realized the true gravity of the situation. This was no longer a family disagreement. It was an organized scheme to take over my life and my assets. In the following days, I did everything he said. Changed my passwords, installed cameras, rewrote my will. Each step made me feel stronger, more in control, like I was reclaiming ownership of my life. He came to my house twice, but I saw him clearly on the cameras and didn't open the door. I wasn't ready for another confrontation, not until I was completely protected. My best friend, Nancy, was the one who told me that Ethan and Amanda had been walking around the neighborhood, asking the neighbors whether I'd been acting strange, meeting strangers, or showing signs of confusion or weakness. They were gathering false statements to build a case claiming I was mentally incompetent, preparing to seize control of my finances. That discovery made me furious and more determined than ever. If they wanted a legal war, I was ready to fight. On Friday morning, Amanda showed up at my door, but this time she wasn't alone. She brought along an older woman who introduced herself as a social worker, saying they were there to check on my welfare because there were reports that I was isolated and neglecting myself. I looked through the glass and said firmly, "I don't meet anyone without an appointment. Any official assessment must take place with my attorney present." The woman said it was just a friendly visit, that they were only concerned about me. I replied, "You should have thought about that before excluding me from the wedding and threatening me over money." I told them to direct all communication through Attorney Caldwell. Amanda's voice shifted. She pretended to choke up. "I love you like my own mother. I just want to make sure you're okay." But her tone was fake, rehearsed as if she were reading from a script. Another performance carefully staged to manipulate me emotionally. When they left, I immediately called Attorney Caldwell and told him everything. He said I handled it perfectly, that any inspection without a court order and without my lawyer present was invalid. But he also warned me, "They're not going to stop, Christina. Next time, it might be the police or an actual lawsuit." That evening, I sat alone in my small home in Austin, Texas, watching the new security camera feeds, thinking about how drastically my life had changed. Just 2 months ago, I was a devoted mother, proud to be helping my only son. Now, I was a woman fighting to keep her freedom from her own family. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a warrior, a 67-year-old warrior who had finally realized her true strength and who would never let anyone take it away again. Late that night, the phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up and recognized the voice instantly. It was Ethan. His tone was different, shaky, scared. He said, "Mom, we need to talk. Things have gone too far. I don't want this to turn into a legal war." I replied, "You chose this war, Ethan, the moment you treated your mother as an obstacle instead of the person who gave you life," he said. "I never meant to hurt you. Everything's been misunderstood." We can fix this if you'd just be more reasonable. Reasonable. That word again. To them, reasonable meant tolerating being exploited, spending money to buy their ingratitude, and a love that never truly existed. I said, if you really want to talk, meet me at Attorney Caldwell's office, with witnesses present, because I will never again let myself be manipulated or guilt-tripped. Ethan hung up without another word, and I knew any hope of reconciliation was gone. The war my son started officially reached my doorstep on a Tuesday morning, when a court officer appeared at my door holding a sealed envelope. Inside was a lawsuit from the state of Texas, petitioning the court to declare me legally incompetent, filed and signed by Ethan Miller, my only son, requesting that he be appointed as my legal guardian. As I read those pages, a storm of anger and heartbreak surged through me, an emotion I had never known in all my 67 years. My own son, the boy I had raised alone, loved, and sacrificed my entire life for, was now trying to prove his mother insane to steal her money. Attorney Henry Caldwell arrived in less than an hour after my call. He read through each page, his expression growing darker. He said, "This case file is very professionally prepared. They've hired an excellent legal team. Christina, this is more serious than we thought. Their strategy was diabolical. They accused me of dementia, paranoia, and being manipulated by outsiders. As evidence, they listed the perfectly rational things I had done to protect myself: stopping financial support for them, installing security cameras around my house, refusing to meet anyone without my attorney present. All of it was twisted into signs of mental illness. My independence was labeled irresponsibility. My self-defense was called paranoia, and my dignity was rebranded as senile confusion." Attorney Caldwell explained that we had 30 days to respond, and the case could drag on for months. He advised me to undergo full medical evaluations, find witnesses who could confirm my sound mind, and gather proof of their true motives. The next day, I met with a top neurologist, Dr. Robert Chambers. For 3 consecutive days, I went through a series of neurological and psychological tests, memory checks, MRI scans, blood tests, and cognitive evaluations. The results confirmed what I had always known. I was completely healthy, lucid, and mentally sharp. While waiting for the results, Attorney Caldwell began compiling evidence of the financial abuse I had suffered over the years. He requested 3 years of bank statements, money transfer receipts, and every record showing what I had paid for Ethan and Amanda. When I saw the summary he prepared, even I was stunned. A total of over $43,000 in just 3 years, all taken from my pension and savings to fund the luxurious lifestyle of 2 people who saw me as a burden. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Caldwell hired a private investigator to uncover their true financial situation. The findings were even more shocking. Ethan earned nearly 3 times my retirement income, and Amanda, before she quit her job, had a steady paycheck as well. Together, they made enough to live comfortably, pay rent, and even save money. Yet they had over $15,000 in credit card debt. They used my money to cover basic expenses while burning through their own salaries on travel, designer items, and shallow luxuries. Worse still, the investigator discovered that Ethan had lied to me repeatedly. The car repairs he mentioned never existed. The medical emergencies Amanda supposedly had were fabricated. The work expenses were entirely fake. Every single story had been a ploy to squeeze more money out of me, beyond what I was already paying monthly. It was a calculated scam that had lasted for 3 years, one that only ended when I discovered the truth about their secret wedding. Attorney Caldwell compiled everything into a thick, airtight dossier: proof of emotional manipulation, evidence of deliberate lies, documentation of financial exploitation, and now, a legal conspiracy to steal a mother's assets. Our case was strong, but they weren't standing still either. 2 weeks later, I started noticing strange things. Strangers knocking on my door asking, "Are you okay?" Neighbors whispering about my mental state. Store clerks asking, "Ma'am, are you doing all right?" And even my former family doctor receiving calls about my psychiatric history. They were trying to weave a web of rumors, collecting half-truths to create the illusion that everyone was worried about my sanity. But their plan backfired. Nancy and several close neighbors, outraged by the invasive questions, told me everything. That became crucial evidence proving that Ethan and Amanda were orchestrating a deliberate smear campaign. During that period, Attorney Caldwell also introduced me to a support group for elderly women who had suffered financial abuse by family members. The stories I heard there made me realize I wasn't alone. Rosa, 72, had spent 2 years fighting her own children, who tried to force her to sell her home and split the money. Carmen, 69, was sued by her grandson, who accused her of being manipulated by her new boyfriend. All of them had one thing in common. They had been turned into financial tools by their own flesh and blood, no longer seen as human beings with feelings. The companionship of the women in that support group became my greatest source of strength. They helped me understand that what was happening didn't define my worth. I wasn't a bad mother, nor a weak woman. 3 weeks after receiving the lawsuit, the Texas State Court sent a notice for a preliminary hearing. It would take place in 1 month, where the judge would decide whether there was enough evidence to continue the case to declare me legally incompetent. Attorney Henry Caldwell prepared me thoroughly. We reviewed every detail, built our strategy, anticipated questions, and he reminded me, "Christina, stay calm, speak clearly, and no matter what, don't let them provoke you." A week before the hearing, Ethan showed up for the last time before everything would be decided. He came with a Protestant pastor I had never met, saying he wanted to make peace through faith. The pastor preached about forgiveness, honoring parents, and family love according to God's will. Ethan cried, saying he only wanted to protect me, that things could go back to the way they were if I just trusted him again. Part of me, the mother's heart, almost gave in. Watching my son cry, hearing the apology I had waited months to hear, for a brief moment, I nearly forgot everything. But then I remembered the lawsuit, the lies, the plot to declare me insane and seize my assets. And I knew, if he truly felt remorse, he would have withdrawn the lawsuit before coming to talk about forgiveness. I turned to the pastor and said, "I respect faith, Father, but God also teaches that justice and protecting the innocent are part of faith too." Then I looked Ethan straight in the eyes. "If you truly want forgiveness, start by withdrawing the lawsuit and returning the money you stole from your mother." Instantly, the tears stopped. His face turned cold. Ethan said, "You're making a huge mistake. I have enough evidence to prove you're insane. You'll lose everything." I realized the mask had fallen again. The meeting with the pastor was just their final manipulation tactic. They wanted me to surrender voluntarily to avoid a courtroom where their lies would be exposed. That night, before the hearing, I barely slept. I reread every document, every piece of evidence, every argument. But more than anything, I looked back at my life. I thought about the woman I once was, gentle, fearful, always trying to buy love with money. And I thought about the woman I had become, strong, independent, and unafraid to defend her dignity. That transformation had been painful but freeing. No matter the outcome, I had already won the most important battle, the one against fear and blind submission. I had learned one simple truth: I deserve respect. When I finally fell asleep, it was the first peaceful night's rest I'd had in months. The sleep of someone who knows she did the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing to do. The next morning, the sky was clear and cold. I put on a navy blue suit, the same one I had bought to attend Ethan's college graduation. How ironic I was wearing it now, to attend the hearing where my son tried to destroy me. Attorney Caldwell picked me up. On the way, he said, Judge Charles Monroe is fair, sharp, and doesn't let emotions cloud his judgment. He only believes in evidence. When we arrived at the courthouse, I saw Ethan and Amanda already seated with their two attorneys. Amanda wore a black dress as if attending a funeral, and perhaps she was the funeral of the bond between a mother and her son. Ethan avoided my eyes, his hands trembling, while Marlene, Amanda's mother, sat in the back row with a smug look, as if overseeing her daughter's victory. When our eyes met, I saw the same icy, contemptuous stare I'd seen the day she came into my home. The hearing began. Their lawyer opened with talk about my age, my alarming behavioral changes, my poor financial judgment, and even presented neighbors claiming they had seen me acting strangely. Then, it was our turn. Attorney Caldwell countered sharply. He presented the medical report, proving my full mental clarity, laid out the extensive evidence of financial abuse, and dismantled every fabricated story Ethan had used to exploit his own mother. The defining moment came when Caldwell submitted security footage from my home cameras. The video showed Ethan and Amanda sneaking around my garden, watching my routine, clear evidence that they were plotting against me. He also submitted proof that they had tried to bribe neighbors into giving false testimony. Judge Charles Monroe listened carefully, asked questions to both sides, and then left to deliberate. Those 2 hours of waiting were the longest of my life. When he returned, his voice was clear, strong, and decisive. There is no evidence whatsoever that Mrs. Christina lacks mental capacity. The medical findings confirm she is fully competent. On the contrary, the evidence indicates this was a deliberate attempt to exploit an elderly person through the legal system. The court not only dismissed Ethan and Amanda's petition, but also ordered them to pay all court costs and opened an investigation into their fraudulent actions. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, but also a deep, aching sadness. I had won the legal battle, yet I had completely lost the son I once loved more than life itself. Ethan, the same boy who had tried to have his own mother declared mentally unfit, was no longer the child I once held in my arms with unconditional love and sacrifice. That afternoon, back in my quiet home, I called Attorney Caldwell to ask what the next step should be. I told him I wanted to sue Ethan and Amanda for emotional damages and reclaim the money they had taken, but he advised me to think carefully. He said, Christina, you've already won the greatest battle. Your freedom and dignity have been restored. Maybe now it's time to close this chapter instead of living in bitterness. I thought about it all night. I asked myself, did I really want to spend the rest of my life in court, fighting the very son I gave birth to? Would revenge truly bring me the peace I was searching for? In the end, I realized he was right. I had regained my freedom, my dignity, and learned to love myself not through sacrifice, but through boundaries and self-respect. I had found my strength and my voice again, and it was time to use that energy to build a better life instead of destroying my soul with resentment. The war was over, and I had won the most important battle of all, the one for myself. 6 months have passed since the court's decision. Now, as I tell this story, I'm sitting on the balcony of my new apartment in Austin, Texas, watching the sunset turn the sky golden. I finally understand what it means to live for myself. 3 weeks after the hearing, I made one of the biggest decisions of my life. I sold my old house, the one where I raised Ethan, the one that held the dream of a perfect family that never truly existed. With the money from the sale, I bought a 12th floor apartment downtown with a panoramic view that reminds me, every day, that the world is bigger than the pain my family caused. This change wasn't just about space, it was about my soul. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every small plant on the balcony was chosen by me, for me, based on what made me happy, not what others expected me to do. For the first time in decades, my home reflected who I truly was, not the mask of a woman who lived only to sacrifice. Nancy, my closest friend who stood by me through everything, helped me move in. As she looked around the bright, sunlit apartment, she smiled and said, "Christina, you look at least 10 years younger. I've never seen that light in your eyes before." She was right. I had regained not only financial freedom, but also my identity. With the remaining money after paying off debts and investing for the future, I decided to finally do the things I had dreamed of for years but never dared to, because my money had always gone to Ethan and Amanda. The first thing I did was travel not to luxury destinations, but to places that meant something to me. I flew to Chicago to visit my cousin Margaret, whom I hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. We spent a week talking, laughing, crying, reminiscing about our youth, and I felt as if I had reconnected with a lost part of myself. Then I drove to Florida to see the ocean for the first time in my life. It sounds strange, but at 67, I had never seen the sea. My whole life, I had prioritized others, always telling myself, there's something more urgent, someone who needs me more, and never allowed myself a single day just for me. I stayed at a small beachfront inn for 5 peaceful days. Every morning, I woke early to watch the sunrise over the waves, walked along the sand, and chatted with other travelers my age, people who were also rediscovering their freedom in their golden years. It was one of the happiest weeks of my life. When I returned to Austin, I began rediscovering the simple joys I once loved but never had time for. I enrolled in a beginner's watercolor class at the University of Texas Senior Arts Center. I discovered I had a talent for painting and felt a strange peace each time I dipped my brush into soft colors, blending them on the canvas as if healing my own soul. I also started volunteering at a neighborhood daycare center twice a week, helping care for children whose single mothers had to leave early for work. The tiny, unconditional hugs of those little ones reminded me that real love has nothing to do with money. Through that work, I met wonderful new friends. People who liked me for who I was, not for what I had. We now host dinner gatherings twice a month, sharing our stories and laughter moments I cherish deeply. I met Helen, 71, who escaped her children's control and now travels across the country in her little RV. Carolyn, 65, opened a family bakery and discovered her gift for beautiful pastries that the whole neighborhood loves. And Rita, 69, went back to college to study psychology just to better understand herself and others. We all shared one thing in common. We were once treated like ATM machines by our families, but we all found true strength after 60. Now, each of us is living the best version of ourselves. A year after the trial, I received an unexpected phone call. It was Ethan. His voice was different, lower, slower, tired. He said he wanted to see me, that he had something important to tell me. We agreed to meet at a small cafe in downtown Austin. When I saw Ethan walk in, I barely recognized him. He looked thinner, worn down, perhaps finally paying the price for the choices of adulthood. Ethan apologized to me formally. He said that financial pressure and Amanda's family's influence had pushed him to make choices he now deeply regretted. He admitted that their marriage was falling apart, that Amanda had shown her true colors once the money was gone, and that he finally understood the kind of person he had married. I sat in silence, listening as my son tried to explain, to justify 3 years of lies and manipulation. When he finished, I simply said, "I appreciate your apology, but some wounds are too deep, they can't be healed by a few words." Ethan asked if we could rebuild our mother-son relationship. I replied, "I'm willing to get to know the man you're trying to become, but I'll never again be the mother who's used and disrespected." I made it clear, If you want a relationship with me, it must be built on mutual respect. No more asking for money. No more calls just to demand things. We talk honestly. We care genuinely. From then on, we began rebuilding something new. He visited every 2 weeks, always called ahead, always showed respect. We talked about work, life, mistakes, and lessons. It wasn't the mother-son bond I once dreamed of, but it was an honest connection between two adults, learning to respect each other. As for Amanda, we never spoke again. According to Ethan, their marriage fell apart once my money stopped flowing. She moved back in with her parents, and Ethan rented a small apartment within his means. Perhaps that princess finally learned that real life isn't a fairy tale funded by someone else's sacrifice. I no longer feel angry toward her, honestly. I feel pity. Pity for a woman who never learned to love with her heart, only with her dependence on material things, and who never knew how to build something real. 2 years later, I can say one thing for certain. I am a completely different person. Not because I changed my home or habits, but because I changed from within. I learned to love myself, to say no, and to understand that I deserve respect. My finances are stable and secure. My pension allows me to live comfortably. My investments grow steadily each month, and I have a detailed will, ensuring that my assets will go toward causes that truly matter. I also created a fund to help older women who suffer domestic abuse, something I'm deeply proud of. With attorney Henry Caldwell's help, that organization has already helped dozens of women escape situations like the one I once lived through. My health is excellent. I walk every morning, eat well, and sleep peacefully every night. Years of fear and manipulation once drained me without my even realizing it. But now, I am free. Not because I have no one beside me, but because I've learned to stand tall without anyone controlling my life. Now that I'm free from that burden, I feel younger and more energized than ever. I have new plans for the future. I want to travel more, visit new countries, maybe even learn another language, perhaps Italian. I want to keep painting, and who knows, one day, I might host a small watercolor exhibition in downtown Austin. Above all, I'll continue helping other women reclaim their strength and freedom, just as I did. Sometimes I wonder, if I hadn't discovered that secret marriage, if I hadn't found the courage to stop funding them, what would my life look like now? Maybe I'd still be supporting Ethan and Amanda, still believing I was being a good mother without realizing I had become nothing more than an emotional bank account. That humiliating day, when I heard the words, "Only for special people," turned out to be the greatest gift God ever gave me. It was the shock that woke me up, that made me stop accepting the scraps of affection bought with money, and helped me understand that real love can't be bought or sold. Now, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who respects herself. I see someone who has learned that it's better to be alone with dignity than surrounded by people who don't respect you. I see a survivor who became a warrior, who turned pain into wisdom and betrayal into freedom. People often ask me, was it worth it losing your son over money? My answer is always the same. I didn't lose my son over money. I simply realized I never truly had the son I thought I did. What I regained is worth more than any relationship built on exploitation. I regained my self-respect, my independence, and my peace of mind. I regained my true self, Christina Walker, the woman who once lost herself trying to buy a love that never existed. This story is fictional, but inspired by real events. Names and locations have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. Christina is just a mother like so many others who once believed that love could hold a family together, even at the cost of everything. But sometimes, silence only prolongs the pain, while speaking up is the first act of self-protection and dignity. If you were in her place, would you choose silence, or would you speak up? We don't tell this story to judge, but to remind you, no matter how deep the wounds, God always has a way of guiding us toward peace and justice. May He bless all those who are rediscovering their strength and faith within their own homes. Stay tuned for the 2 stories at the end of this video, where every soul finds light and redemption in their own way.